I will introduce you to our panel quickly, who will be speaking to you a little bit later. So I'm joined by Mahera Khan, who is a leading actress in the Pakistan film industry. I have got Samara Haq, who is an Academy member for the Varkey Foundation and also Senior Director at the George Washington Medical Faculty. I've got Joel Gomez, who is the Director for the Institute of Education Studies at George Washington University. I have Urvashi Sahni, who is the CEO and founder of the Study Hall Foundation. And I have Rebecca Winthrop, who is the Director for the Center of Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So this is a briefing session, so I will introduce the topic, and then you will hear from each of our speakers for 10 minutes. They will then have a chance to question each other on their briefings, and if we have time, we'll open it to the floor for questions. So, as I said, by way of introduction, my name's Leonora, and I live and work in Ghana for the Varkey Foundation, where we're running 4 projects, one of which is funded by the Department of International Development and is a girls' education project, which qualifies me a little bit to talk about girls' education, because we've been working with 13,000 marginalized girls in Africa's first live, interactive, two-way distance learning education program. I'd like to tell you a few things that we've learned about girls' education over the course of the 4 years we've been running the project, because I think some of them seem obvious, but not all of them. And I'd like to provide an introduction to this session. So, working with our girls, we found that it's not enough just to do literacy and numeracy. Our project is evaluated on the literacy and numeracy measures, but we've found unless there's a holistic intervention, that includes improvement in classroom practices, includes things like financial literacy, and includes things like child protection, there's really no point doing much at all. Girls won't learn in a vacuum. We found that all of our sessions need to be contextualized and relatable, using examples from Ghana, the country we work in, using real-life stories, and using local language. And we found that when our teachers do that, they unearth stories that would not come up in a normal classroom situation. Girls feel much more comfortable to share and learn. We've learned that without involving the community, the parents, teachers, in planning what we're teaching, it is less effective. We are always seeking feedback, and we found that we need to keep our curriculum fluid, and we replan as often as necessary. So there's no one curriculum that gets rolled out year after year. We found that when teachers are required to teach girls and to treat girls equitably, by giving them leadership positions, by giving them an equal opportunity to ask and answer questions, that girls become more confident. They then volunteer for leadership positions. They volunteer to ask and answer questions. And we found, very importantly, that you have to include boys. So boys go to school with girls. Boys are involved in girls' problems. Teenage pregnancy is not a girl problem. It's a teenage problem. Workload for girls. That's a boys and a girls problem. If a girl has too many chores at home, it's probably because her brother isn't doing enough. But boys don't understand this, and we can't expect them to. We have to involve them in understanding girls' education, because girls' education affects boys too. Where we are told that girls are allowed to cry, boys must be strong, we see boys who are unable to communicate, and that affects them for the rest of their lives. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mahera Khan, who will introduce herself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I go?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. You're right there.
Hello, everyone. You know, this is, I was just speaking to one of the professors here and telling him how intimidating it is for me. He said that it's probably not, because you're used to public. And the thing is, I wish I could sing and dance here, or maybe, you know, say a monologue, and that would be easier. But really, to be here with such an esteemed panel, it is intimidating. So excuse me for any mistakes that I shall make, starting from now. So here goes nothing. I am Mahera Khan. I am an actor from Pakistan. And most of you probably don't know me. I hope some of you do. But that doesn't matter right now. I actually sat down and I was thinking, what is my first memory of a teacher? And obviously, just writing a speech, I was like, God, I'm back in school. And I was like, what is it? What is the first memory? I realized that I don't have a memory without a teacher. And it bothered me. I was like, why is it that I can't remember a time in my life that I didn't have a teacher in that memory? I realized that I opened my eyes to my mother, who was a teacher. So you can imagine what my childhood was like. Flashcards of vowels. She still, honestly, sometimes she actually still says, I'm like, Amma, can I do this? She's like, C-A-N. I'm like, I'm so old now, you don't need to do that with me anymore. But yes, so it was a childhood of flashcards and Dr. Seuss and blackboards and books. It was pretty amazing. When we were growing up in my school, she was the first teacher in my school who became a remedial teacher. So in my home, we used to have children coming in who were dyslexic, autistic, and all kinds of other issues, as my school or any other school at that time used to call it. And what I used to see was my mother joking with them, laughing with them, answering their questions like she was their best friend. Let me tell you something. Sometimes it used to make me jealous. I didn't understand what it was then. They trusted her. She had a unique way of speaking to them. They loved her. She loved them. I didn't get it then, and I get it now. All learning is understanding. I have to care about you to understand you. And once I care and understand, I'll be able to tell you whatever it is that I want to tell you. I quickly messaged my mother. I said, what is the most important thing that you think a teacher needs to have? She says, you have to make the child trust you because they're vulnerable. They're in your hands. You can change them. You can shape them. So here goes. When I look back at all my teachers, I know that I have been affected by most of them. From the smiley faces on my test papers, even when I didn't do well, and mostly I did do well, the eyes that believed in me, or the eyes that scowled at me when I was naughty, which was most often. But that did not break me. Those eyes did not break me. Those were different kind of eyes, which tried to explain to me that you are doing something which might not be right, but you know what? It's okay. Those are the eyes of a teacher that believes in you. So I stand here in front of you because of all those teachers who understood me, who understand that they have a huge responsibility in shaping the way every child thinks, making a difference by seeing the difference. I will repeat that because I think it's very important. Making a difference by seeing the difference. I can, an actor, I think it's the most unique and amazing job because I get into so many characters that now I feel empathy for each and every person that I meet. When I meet a person, I don't look at them that they are wearing a pink nice dress or a black suit right here, or even you with a white jacket. No, I don't look at them like that. I look at them like each one of them has a story. And oh my God, this would be so interesting to get to know them better and to see where they've lived, how they've lived, and maybe what teachers they've had and who's affected them. Today, I have a voice and a platform, and I plan to do exactly that, make a difference as much as I can. Recently, I joined the Girls Education Champions Network South Asia Hub. I became aware of it through their work because of Dr. Samara Haq, which I'm very grateful for. When she told me about the initiative, it actually touched my heart. I am a big believer that girls, as well as boys, I agree with her completely. For some reason, when we talk about girls, we leave out the boys. No, we have to do this together for all the reasons that you said. So yes, I believe that a girl and a boy, a student, a child can do whatever it is that they want to do as long as they've had champions. And our teachers are our champions. I'm sorry, I don't think my speech will be as informative or as good as theirs, maybe not as long. But I will end with something that my mother always used to say. It's a Dr. Seuss book that I still have. It says my name, and it says nursery with a smiley face on it. I keep it very close to my heart, and I have the biggest Dr. Seuss collection, which I share with my child, even today. And it is, my mother used to say it like this, and will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.5% guaranteed. Kid, you will move mountains. May we all over here move our hills, move some mountains, and go on. Thank you so much for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahera. I think it's always, as a teacher myself, fantastic to hear about the importance of teachers in girls' education.
It is. It's very important.
So I'd like you to welcome, please, Urvashi Sahni, who will introduce herself in her briefing. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you to Varki Foundation for inviting me, and for, more importantly, for having this session, even more. And thank you to be with all the people over here. My name is Urvashi Sahni, and I come from India. Actually, my parents come from Rawalpindi. And Mahera and I were talking about it, and her parents come from India. And I was talking to someone else, and his parents come from Lucknow. And now he's in Rawalpindi. So Pakistan and India have this interesting kind of relationship. But they refugeed in 1947 when the partition happened, and then they settled in Pune, and that's where I was raised. And then I was transported to UP, which is in North India. It's one of the most populous states in India. It has 1/6 of India's population, and India has 1/6 of the world's population. So I'll leave you to do the math. And it's also considered one of the most backward states in terms of human and economic indicators. And I was transported there through involuntary migration because I was married off. I don't know your first name. Leonora. Many of the things that you said resonated with me because we've been experiencing them. The conversation around girls' education these days, for some time now, has been, it started off with get them into school. And then it went on to, now they should complete school. And went on to, it should be a high-quality education that they should complete. So let me tell you my story. I went to a very good private school, St. Mary's School. It was an Irish missionary school. And I finished class 12 on top of my class. And 1 year later, I was engaged and married off and transferred off. So when we talk about, so I learned many technical skills, to your point about literacy and numeracy. But what I didn't learn was an important lesson that I had the right to use these skills for myself, or to build a life of my own, to have any aspirations. So in terms of empowerment or gender, I didn't learn that I was an equal person. So I think we need to broaden the conversation, definitely, that if girls' education is important for gender equality, then we should be focusing on gender equality and making sure and looking at the kind of education that you get and see whether it does, in fact, teach you how to be an equal person. For the last, since 1983, I've been a feminist and a women's rights activist, and 1986, an educator, and with a strong focus on girls' education. Our foundation reaches out to more than 60,000 students in rural and urban contexts, and many of them are girls. We founded several schools, but the one that is relevant here is a girls' school. We started with 30 girls. They're from the poorest backgrounds, and now we have 900. And we've taken their pedagogy to 746 schools, which is nearly 75,000 girls. And what is important about this school and what is unique? When you mentioned, Leonora, that literacy and numeracy isn't enough. From my own experience and that of my cousins, who went a step ahead, and she had a bachelor's degree, she was married at 22 to a chartered accountant in Delhi. And 4 years after she was married, she burnt herself, or was murdered, we don't know. And here was an educated girl with a college degree, and yet she didn't know that there were other options. It took me a long time to understand that I was an equal person and that I had the right to equality. Our schools don't teach us that. So if we are looking, they don't teach us that, and they don't teach boys that. They don't teach boys that girls are equal persons. Or they don't teach boys that they are equal persons. An equal person means 5 equals 5. It doesn't mean that 8 equals, I'm equal and you're there, but I'm still equal. That's not what it means. So it doesn't teach boys that. What we've done in our school is that we have focused very strongly on this component. We made it one of our educational goals, saying that, importantly, we must teach girls that they are equal persons worthy of respect, with a full right to live lives of their own choosing, and they must then acquire skills that equip them for that. Right? But the first important thing is a perception. You mentioned teachers, Mahera, and so did you, about trust, etc. That we gain a perception of ourselves depending on how we are treated. If all our lives we are treated as second-class citizens, with less food at home, with less education at home, I remember I would iron the clothes and my brothers would play cricket. I was married off at 17 plus, and my brothers had engineering degrees, commerce degrees, etc. But now I'm the only PhD in the whole family. So my point is, I had to say that, stand up for my side. But the point is that what do we teach in our schools? We don't teach the messages they get from society, the messages they get from home, the messages they read in books, the messages they get in school. The school didn't build any aspirations in me either, right? Are not that you are an equal person, that you deserve everything that anybody has, that you deserve respect. And that's how we treat ourselves. So it's very important in our school we focus on giving girls these messages. Then in a very deliberate way, we've put together a curriculum, and it's informed by critical feminist pedagogy, where we create a space once a week, it's part of the official curriculum, where we talk very seriously about power, about patriarchy, who has it, who doesn't, and why. Teaching them that they are being discriminated against, that it's not okay, it is not natural, it's not God-given. And that they have the right to protest, they have the right to feel indignant. We use drama, we use dance, we use poetry, we use literature, we use discussions. But the idea is to build this perception. And we have found great success in that. We found not only were we able to retain them, but they have gone on for higher education. And let me tell you a small story about one of the girls. Her name is Khushbu, so her father wanted to marry her off when she was 15. She resisted because we teach our girls to resist. Our teachers are trained to become advocates of girls' rights and to teach girls to become self-advocates and to work with parents to advocate for girls' rights with the community. So she resisted, and we intervened, and he stopped. He held back. When she completed task 10, the next year, he was adamant, and she topped her class. He said, no, she's getting married, and I'm pulling her out. She's had enough. In any case, this is making her very rebellious, and I don't want her there. She absolutely stood over there while we were trying to convince him and said, I'm going to study, I'm going to study. When he went home, he took an iron rod and he beat her. We have a safety net, so she got word to us, we got the police, child line, and we were able to rescue her. He turned her out. She went and lived with her grandmother. And guess what? Today, she's doing her master's in women's studies and determined to finish her PhD and become a professor in a college, right? So we find that our retention rates are very high. Our girls, we have 100% transition into higher education, and now MA is the new normal for all our girls. They finished their MBA, they're doing law degrees, and they're going to the same university where I got my first master's. So the whole approach works. And more importantly, everyone says that educate a girl, educate a village. But what do they mean by that? They mean that educated girls make good mothers, and there will be more educated families. What we found is, to give a different twist to that educated girls are able to empower their mothers and the other community to look at girls as equal persons deserving respect, having the right to choose whether to be mothers or not. Right? And I think that's really important. I hear so often the economic argument, the instrumental argument, and I can't tell you what it does to me. Whether or not it raises the GDP of a country, a girl has a right to be educated and she has the right to her life. Whether or not she becomes a good mother, of course she will. She has the right to be educated. And we found that girls have been able to empower their mothers, make them stronger. They have been able to resist domestic violence at home. And in many cases, they've been able to change their fathers. Alcoholic fathers, they've been able to change them, and they've had a gentling influence on their brothers. We have started a boys' school. Let's not leave the boys out. But I have a different way of thinking of let's not leave the boys out. Definitely, let's not leave the boys out. What that means is boys need to learn to become equal people. When you talked about domestic chores, right? Everyone is very happy when we talk about the empowerment of girls. Oh yeah, they should become doctors and lawyers and engineers and go to the moon and Mars, et cetera, right? And the poor thing is going to go to Mars, come back, cook quickly, feed her children, and while he will watch TV. And that's what many women do. And the moment you start talking about boys becoming more equal, empowering boys to be taking on domestic activity, oh man, there's such a resistance. I had to tell I was training principals, 71 of them, all men. 71 schools, 71 principals, all men. And so I was training, and I was talking about this. And there was all kinds of, resistance and argument. This is unnatural, all kinds of stuff. I said, hey, tell me, what is the whole fear about? It's a broom. It's a rolling pin. It is not a nuclear bomb. Why are you so frightened? And the point was, I said, when you're so terrified of something, it's time to examine it. Clearly, it's a status thing. Clearly, it's a power thing. So let's talk about it. So we have a boys' school, and we are engaging in critical feminist pedagogy with them and trying to get them to understand that these are not girls' issues, that street violence is not girls' issue, domestic violence is not a girl's issue, it's everybody's issue. But the way we are looking at it, as I've been working on this, we're trying to build a curriculum, I realized, and that poor things, they feel so guilty, and it's not their fault. It isn't. It's a structural problem. I feel so bad. So then I said, okay, let's change gears. The idea is let's talk to them about their aspirations. What do they want to be? How can they be the best that they can be? And what's the best kind of man they can be? Let's get them to redefine masculinity, redefine manhood, redefine what it means to be a strong man. That it includes gentleness, that it includes caring, that it includes being compassionate, empathetic, and helping at home, being a good father. And so that's the approach we're trying to take. So in summing up, I think I've overshot my time, but I'm just going to quickly finish. So clearly, education, business as usual, is not good enough. And even now, education is very focused on technical academic skills. It is not broad enough, it is not holistic enough, and teachers' roles are very limited to technical pedagogy. How do you deliver a lesson? That's all the training, that's what training's all about. I think it's important to broaden the idea of quality education. A quality education must teach you how to live. It should be closely tied to your lives. It should be focused on life outcomes, not just learning outcomes. And definitely, it should be focused on important issues like equality. And my question to everyone is that if it's important for students to have a mathematical imagination, a scientific imagination, why is it not important for them to have a social and political imagination, to learn about equality? Why is that not as important as learning equations? Equality is an equation, right? Why isn't it important? And so why should we not include that as an official part of the curriculum, as an official part of teacher training, pre-service teacher training, and as an official part of the conversation surrounding girls' education? We should not be afraid of talking about power. If we are democratic citizens and believe in democracy, then democracy is all about power. And if we're trying to educate children for citizenship, then we should be talking about power, and there should be an open discourse on it. We are in the process, encouraged by Michelle Obama's Let Girls Learn initiative. We're setting up a girls' education champion network, which Rebecca will talk more about. And Study Hall Foundation is going to lead the South Asia hub. Because as I talk about India, I'm sure Mahera and Samara are nodding, and many of my Pakistani friends in the audience, that things are not very different in Pakistan, in Nepal, in Bangladesh, Afghanistan. They're much the same, and parts of Africa too. So the idea is, let's hold hands, let's share practices, let's get together, and together men and women both. When I talk about girls' education champions, they need not all be women, and they shouldn't be. They should be men, because it's a human rights issue. And let's work together to solve the issue of gender, equality, and impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that very personal story. Rebecca, would you like to follow on? Thank you.
Well, it's always hard to follow Urvashi. I should have had a request early on to go before Urvashi. It's my yeah. Sorry, Mira. Sorry. I'm not often on panels with you, so next time I'll get to say that. So I'm Rebecca Winthrop. I direct the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. And I have been working on the issue of girls and women's education for the last 20 years. I actually knew very little about this topic growing up. I grew up in a very small town. I'm from Oregon, which is a very rural part of the United States, in a little sort of mountain town. I was quite isolated. And then in college, I heard a woman who happened to give a very courageous speech in 1995, a woman by the name of Hillary Clinton, who, as First Lady, traveled to Beijing and gave a very powerful speech about the rights of women, that women's rights are human rights. And I got very inspired and said, you know, I want to do that. And my first job after college, at the very lowest level of the totem pole, was working in Central America with the United Nations. And one of the projects that I got assigned to was a legal reform project. It was a project around reforming gender-based violence legal standards. So there's a lot of workshops, a lot of lawyers, and one of my tasks was to analyze feedback from the women in the communities who this legal reform was supposed to help, women who were subject to severe domestic violence. And I thought, being young, naive, and experienced, that this was, you know, a great thing, and they were going to say, "This is wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing the legal reform. You know, thank you, UN. Thank you, Rebecca." And instead, they said, "You really don't know what you're talking about." They said, "Look, you know, that's sweet of you that you think a legal reform is going to change our circumstances today, but," and they were totally right, and they had exactly. They had much better insight than I. They said, "Look, you're going to do the legal reform. It's going to take, you know, a couple years to go through the government. It's going to take another at least 4 years to before the police are trained on the reform. So we're looking at, you know, 8 to 10 years before we see any difference. We're suffering now. We're living in very difficult, abusive relationships. What we really, really want is to learn how to read. That is the number one thing we want. That is going to change our lives. If we know how to read, we can go out into our community and we can make money, we can start our own business and have our own money and a little independence. We can go to the clinic and without bringing a husband or an older brother with us, by ourselves, and talk to people about what's going on, we can get freedom. And so that was the very first time that I'd ever thought about that. I was 21 years old, and from that moment on, I worked very hard on issues of education around the world, particularly around girls and women. And I have to say, you know, 20 years later, having worked a lot in this topic, those women were spot on. And they certainly believed in their own right, as Urvashi said, and I think it's important we all always acknowledge that education and women and girls empowerment is a human right, and no matter all the other great benefits it brings, girls should have a right to an equal education, just like Urvashi said. However, now that I've worked with a lot of policymakers, a lot of global actors, a lot of people with big purses and big policies, I've learned that you really have to bring both arguments of the heart as well as the head, and that you actually do need to lay out, certainly for policymakers, because that's a lot of what we do at Brookings, the economic arguments, and and many other arguments. So for example, colleagues of mine, a guy by the name of Gene Sperling and Christina Kwok, because I'm going to mention some of the work we did together. We did this book called What Works in Girls' Education, and the subtitle is Evidence for the World's Best Investment, because it really is the world's best investment. The women in Central America were right. They talked about improved economic growth. We know that just 1% increase in women completing secondary school leads to 0.3% economic growth, which is actually a huge amount. A second reason is about increased wages, just like the women had taught me those 20 years ago. For every additional year a woman goes to school, she gets a 12% increase in wages. And those are two good reasons, but there's eight more that I think are really important in my sort of top 10 list. So the other 8 are it saves lives. Girls' education saves lives, both women's lives and children's lives. The next one is it creates healthier and smaller families. The next one is that you get healthier and better educated children. If you educate moms, girls and boys absolutely get higher levels of education. Sort of number 7 on my top 10 list is it decreases child marriage. It's perhaps one of the most effective interventions to decrease child marriage. Number 8 is it leads to empowerment for women, but lots of other people. Number 9 is it promotes political leadership. And number 10, it reduces harm from natural disasters and climate change. So there is a lot of really good reasons that we should invest in girls' education. And in the policy world, you rarely get a silver bullet, and there isn't really no such thing as a silver bullet. But if there ever was one, girls' education is the one that comes closest to it, because it has so many different returns on investment in different areas. And so the good news is that a lot of people have heard that call. A lot of policymakers, a lot of sort of powerful actors in the world have really thought long and hard about what they can do to improve girls' education. And that there has been a collective movement around girls' education for some time, and we've made a lot of progress. So the good news is that since the 2000s till today, we've halved the number of girls who are out of school. So that's huge progress. That's great. And that is all of us. That's been a collective movement. Every last advocate and NGO worker, all the way up to governments who have put their money where their mouths is on girls' education policies. The other good news is that we've also halved the number of countries who did not have gender parity in their school systems. Again, great news. However, we do still have a lot of work to be done. And one of the things that we've outlined with a lot of other colleagues in the girls' education community is what we're calling the next generation girls' education issues. And we have 5 next generation issues that a lot of people have been working on in different parts of the world in their own corners, but as a person who looks sort of at global trends and tries to help coalesce global agendas. These are really 5 issues that we're calling on everybody to get behind, and particularly those in power, policymakers and funders, et cetera. The first next generation issue is really to make sure that girls don't just get equal access and attendance and completion rates in primary school, which has been a big focus, but they go right the way through. They get early childhood care, and they go to school, and they stay in school right the way through secondary education. More and more, we're realizing that, that top 10 list on returns on investment for girls' education is just that much higher when girls complete secondary school. The second next generation is one that you've heard several of the panelists talk about, which is quality. There's 130 million kids around the world today who are in school and yet have been in school for many years, up to 4 years, and still can barely write a single word. So you're not getting a lot out of your education if you don't have good quality. And that's something that helps boys and girls together, and that's absolutely fine. One of the things that annoys me and pisses me off is when people in the girls' education movement, and I consider myself one, says, well, we can't really do that. It's not exactly a girls' education thing. It helps boys too. And it's like, well, who cares? It's still really good for girls too. And there's nothing wrong with helping boys along the way, as my previous colleagues have said. So quality for sure. The third one is one that has been touched on a little bit, but I think is really important and quite serious, which is safety. And that's safety to and from school. That's safety in school, not only from sexual abuse and harassment, but straight up attacks and violence on schools. There's a large network called the Global Coalition to Protect Education from Attack, and they track attacks on schools, bombings, kidnappings, maimings, all sorts of terrible attacks. And girls are often targeted, or girls' schools are often targeted. In Pakistan alone, 120,000 girls had to leave school because of big campaigns by the Taliban. And Malala is perhaps one of the most famous symbols of that, but by no means the only. And we really have to deal with that. The fourth next generation issue is about transitions to work. There are countries out there who have done a great job, actually, in getting girls to go to school and stay in school through secondary, and the women are not successfully transitioning to the workforce. We have a colleague, Urvashi and I have a colleague named Mayada Jaber, who's based in Jordan, and she talks about Jordan's education system as preparing boys for the marketplace, the labor market, and girls for the marriage market, because you have girls and boys finishing secondary school in equal numbers, but boys going into the labor force, about 65, 70% of them, and girls only 30%. So again, this is sort of a next generation issue that we all need to think about. And lastly, this is perhaps the most important issue if we want to really see sustainable fundamental change. And it's something that Urvashi mentioned, and I hope, Samara, you do too, is we really need to do a much better job as the global education community in supporting local girls' education leaders. These are the ones who will sustain the effort over time, who know the context best, who know what girls need, who know the innovations that work that need to be scaled up. These are the brave men and women who have been fighting the fight for girls' education for decades and decades. And we need to do a much better job of giving money straight to them so they can scale things up, having them have voice in government policies, debates, and again, networking and bringing them together so they can be stronger together. And for that reason, one of the things that we have incubated at Brookings at the request of Michelle Obama when she was First Lady and had an initiative called Let Girls Learn is this Girls Education Champions Network, which we are not running at Brookings. In fact, mainly it consists of regional hubs around the world. We just sort of incubated and kickstarted it and are handing it over. And the whole purpose is to connect through regional hubs of girls' education networks, this network of girls' education leaders to each other, to share best practice, to build capacity, to exchange tools, and be more stronger global advocates. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in supporting this and joining this to come contact us and let us know how you want to get involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca, for a very concise overview of where we are and what we've still got to do. I'd like to invite Samara Haq to continue with our briefings. Thank you.
So my name is Samara Haq, and I'm trained physician, neurosurgeon from Pakistan. I am on the panel, was asked to talk about my personal story. I've never done this before, so you guys have to bear with me. I will be talking about my experience moving from Pakistan to United States, what brought me back there, what I have learned so far, and what I'm doing now, and what I'm looking forward to do. So I will start by saying that growing up in Pakistan, and I'm going to read because it's my personal stories, and then I will be open to any questions later. Growing up in Pakistan, I was the youngest of 4 girls. My 3 older sisters, all teachers, were source of inspiration and pushed me to excel in school. However, like many girls around the world, I had an early marriage during my studies. I also had my first child before I graduated. I was put in the situation where I had to decide to either save my marriage by remaining in an abusive relationship or complete my studies and pursue my passion to become a doctor. My passion came from the fact that my mother died of a brain tumor. So I wanted to save lives and prevent the suffering that my mother endured. I chose to pursue my passion when the relationship ended. I was told, let's see how you survive on your own. You are just a woman. My dignity as a person was challenged, and I promised myself that night that not only would I survive, but I would thrive. Today I'm standing here as a proud woman rights activist, a single mother who raised 2 beautiful boys, who learned how to respect women, and one of us sitting here. Trust me, the road was difficult, but my will was strong. I was able to make that decision with a lot of moral support from my family, especially my sisters, all teachers. I also became very involved with organizations that help battered women and supported women's empowerment. I was fortunate enough to have support to pursue my education, and I want to give the same opportunity to other girls around the world. This was the reason I got involved with global campaigns like Girl Rising, very close to my heart, and the Girls Champion, Education Champion Network, and Let Girls Learn, where I will be working to raise the profile of initiatives and pioneering leaders who are advancing the cause of girls' education across the region. With this new initiative, the focus will be on connecting the dots between the public and private sector, policymakers, education leaders, celebrity ambassadors, and community leaders. With social media shaping the fabric of all collective lives, global and local influencers can use their online footprint, truly have a transformative effect on the conversation regarding girls' education. This interconnectedness is no longer a nice to have, but a need to have. To truly effect change, technology has connected us in every other parts of our life. And to be successful, our efforts to expand and improve girls' education, we have to be just as interconnected. Otherwise, the risk being sidelined and ineffective. What I have learned through many years, both my struggle and success, is that it was my education that continuously took me forward. It also gave me the skill and expertise to embark on a 20 years of career in global health and teaching in George Washington University and preparing the next generation of healthcare leaders. My hope is the girls around the world would have the same opportunity and support I had to come out of the shadows and overcoming barriers to pursue their dreams and become advocates for girls in their communities. Last, I want to thank you and the members of this panel. I also want to share that my journey is still continuous. I'm not stopping here. I'm still involved in life as a lifelong learner. And finally, I look forward to keep on sharing lessons to continue being an advocate for girls' education through global citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your very personal story. So I'm delighted that we also have a man on our girls' education briefing. A boy.
A boy.
So without further ado.
Old man with a short memory, so I'm reading from my iPad. Thank you, Leonora. So I'm very honored to be here. It's a fantastic panel. The last person that always speaks says, what else can I say? And this is a briefing session, so I can say this is going to be very brief also. I want to talk about education in the United States. I want to talk about girls' education, And I want to talk about girls' education within the context of majority minorities in the United States, and maybe connect it also to education at a global level. So at this point, I would like to start by saying that one of my favorite pastimes is spending time catching up with reading a variety of reading matter on my iPad. That's what I like to do. Very boring. But more specifically, I'm an educator now, but a very frustrated scientist. I never was a biochemist that I wanted to be. In my late night reading, I came across an article once on the next Einstein Now. The next Einstein Now, Sabrina Petersky, happens to be a young woman who at age 14 built a single-engine plane, and at age 23 had her PhD in physics from MIT. The article goes on to state that Sabrina is an example of the growing number of women in the United States graduating with degrees in physics. And the author of the article further states that this growing number of women in physics programs have contributed to the overall increase in graduates from physics programs in the United States. In 2015, there were 8,000, more or less, students who graduated with a degree in physics. This was an increase from the number of graduates in 1999, when there were only around 3,000. So you can see it's not quite tripling, but it almost tripled. So the storyline is that this number has increased primarily because there's also a larger number of young women entering physics programs in the United States. So this seems like good news for women, Rebecca, in the United States. But this is not even the good news. There's even some more good news, if we can believe that. Recent statistics show that across the United States, girls have been overall more successful academically than boys. For example, some data show that about 70% of school valedictorians have been girls. And fewer girls than boys drop out of school and are dismissed from schools. Furthermore, more girls graduate from high school and enroll in college. And recent statistics show that about 67% of college graduates in the United States are girls, and that about 51% of PhDs are girls, and that about 51% of applications to schools of business are also from young women. But this is where the good news stop and the not so good news begin. When data concerning girls' education are disaggregated, we see that the picture for girls' education in the United States may resemble the state of affairs for girls' education globally. The National Assessment for Educational Progress is a national exam called NAEP that's administered to school children in the United States in the 4th grade, the 8th grade, and the 12th grade, and in various content areas, including science, math, reading, and numerous others. So this exam is congressionally mandated and has been around since the late 1960s. The test is administered in school districts, the results tabulated and analyzed, and data reported in a variety of formats, including disaggregated data by gender, race, ethnicity, English language ability, grade levels, subject areas, states, among others. When looking at the disaggregated data and looking at the variables related to gender, race, and ethnicity, we see that girls' education in the United States may not be doing so well after all. Taking only one of the subject areas, science, and only one grade level, fourth grade, and looking at these variables of gender, race, and ethnicity on the latest NAEP scores, reported in 2015, we see the following trend. When comparing the results of NAEP science test scores for white 4th grade boys and white 4th grade girls, we see that boys are on average only one point ahead of girls, a score of 165 compared to 164 for girls. So this is not so bad. However, when we compare the scores of white boys with Hispanic girls, we see that the point spread is wider, 165 for white boys compared to 139 for Hispanic girls, a difference of 26 points. When comparing white boys to African American girls, the results are even more dire. The score of white boys in science continues to be obviously 165 compared to a low of 134 for African American girls. So as we can see from these NAEP science scores for fourth graders, there's only a 1 point difference between the scores of white boys and white girls, but 26 points difference for Hispanic girls and 31 points difference for African American girls. And in looking at other grade levels and other content areas, these fourth grade scores are pretty representative of other NAEP scores. So the story here is not that this in and of itself is a bad story. The story grows even more dire. In 2015, for the first time, the student population in the entire United States became a majority minority. That means that you combine all the minorities, and the minorities are larger than the majority. This is to say that 51% of the students enrolled in public schools in the United States consisted of a majority of minority students. Of this majority-minority enrollment, the Hispanic group was the largest group, followed by African Americans. Added to this new development, student enrollment in the United States public schools came to be a majority of all students from low-income backgrounds. A majority of 51% of the students also enrolled in 2016 were also from homes students coming from low-income homes. And even magnifying the statistics further, the United States currently is the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. And the Hispanic population will continue to grow at a much higher rate than the white population. So you see that this gap will not be getting smaller. It probably will keep getting larger. So what are some of the implications? For one, given historical trends with NAEP scores, many Hispanics and African Americans will continue to be failed by U.S. public education, especially those coming from low-income settings. Second, the U.S. will continue to have a growing number of young minority adults who are not attending college, who may not be learning a trade, who may be unemployed, and who may not be contributing positively to a democratic society. These implications may not be that different than implications for statistics for youth in many countries globally, and especially girls. Obviously, there might be a difference according to scale. So, what may be the cause of this education problem with educating minorities, and especially girls in the United States? Here are some thoughts. And I've gathered these thoughts based on some of the late night readings that I do at my experience in education. I might add, I haven't always been a person in higher education. I've been an elementary school teacher, so I've been a first grade teacher, a second grade teacher, sixth grade, and I've also taught high school. So what are some of the issues that I see might be the problem? So the first cause that I see for this problem has to do with what I call cosmovisión. I like the word cosmovisión rather than worldview. It sounds heavier. It has more gravitas. So world vision is one of these problems. As presenters emphasized during this conference, during the plenary sessions, the current world has been left behind by the accelerated growth of digital events. Not necessarily digital knowledge, but digital events. The cosmovisión for education policymakers, education administrators, and teacher preparation programs in the United States and globally is still driven by a static cosmovisión, a static vision, a positivist vision, a structuralist vision, a linear vision. The classroom is still literally bound by four walls in the classroom. School instruction is driven by deficit views. Students come to school with a deficit that needs to be treated and eradicated like a medical problem. Instruction takes place so that students can get a good job rather than to become a critical thinker that can continue to be a lifelong learner and to invent and create her own jobs, students who can be adaptable. So as a result of this very structuralist, positivist cosmovision, schools are lagging behind in becoming digital learning in communities. Schools continue to encourage learning environments that are exclusive rather than inclusive. Schools continue to want to change their primary stakeholders, students and their parents. And schools continue to foster a place where students come to learn rather than to create events and opportunities for students to learn and to continue learning. So what can educators in the United States and globally do to improve the education of all students, and especially girls? As we have heard throughout the conference yesterday and today, schools need to prepare students to be global citizens. They can do this by creating learning environments where students can create connections and communities of learning. Learning is a social event, not just a cognitive process. And as such, schools need to create opportunities for students to learn by making connections among themselves and among students globally. Schools need to create an environment where all students, their families, and their communities are welcomed and accepted. This includes accepting a student's language, culture, traditions, and not separating these from their education, an education which needs to be a transformation and not a transaction. Education needs to get away from being reductionist and to have education practices based on deficit models. Schools need to create an inclusive environment where all children can learn, not only some. Schools must have the capability to adapt and to accommodate to the learning requirements of their students and not vice versa. Their families and their communities and schools should not educate children should schools not educate children because they're refugees? Should they not educate children because of an ongoing crisis in their region or country? Should they not educate children in their mother tongue because it's difficult? Because schools can't do everything? Finally, national and local education policymakers, school administrators, and education professional development institutions must have the most important thing that I consider to have change in school for all students, and especially girls. And what is this change? What must happen? Is it cosmovision? It is the courage to do what's right. It is often not the case that schools and communities fail to educate students because they lack the solutions or the innovations or the school budgets. Rather, schools and communities fail a large number of students globally and in the United States because of the lack of the courage of policymakers, administrators, and teachers to do the right thing, the thing that we know we have to do. And the courage to do the right thing must come from a cosmovision that includes embracing a global education for students. A cosmovision that prepares students to prosper and have a quality of life as a global citizen. As was expressed in yesterday's plenary session, schools need to prepare students to become a global citizen who live in a democracy that is not just about equal treatment for all, but a democracy that embraces the children with differences for all. So basically, that's what I had to offer. And in listening to this panel, the one thing that I want to add to what I've written is that one of the important things, other than courage, has to do with that cosmovision. Because if that cosmovision, that world vision, doesn't empower an individual, a leader, a policymaker, a government person, if that world vision doesn't empower that person will not have the courage. And many of the issues that we may talk about dealing with educating students globally, and especially girls, has to do with identity. And cosmovisión is a very important component of looking at identity, because a positivist, structuralist point of view in looking at identity places the choice on an individual. And that is not the case, because there are many points of view, as a person like Vygotsky might say, or a Bakhtin might say, that identity is transactional, it's intersectional, it's intersubjective, it's something that happens when Leonora defines me. It has to do with voice. When an administrator is talking, when a parent is talking, where did that voice come from? Is it that person's voice? Or was it heard from a mother and a grandmother and a grandfather? Where is that voice? And the child listens to the voice. And the voices are not all equal. A parent's voice has more authority. A teacher's voice has more authority. An administrator at school has more authority. The voice of a president of a company, of a country, has more authority than the child's. So who is more responsible for creating that child's identity? And how are we going to change it so that the identities that are happening in school right now, that are currently being defined, happen so that all children can learn, especially girls? Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you. We've heard some very personal experiences. We've heard about trust, we've heard about teachers, we've heard about power and patriarchy. We've heard about the importance of listening to the women themselves. And we've heard about women in STEM, listening to women and girls who are from ethnic minorities living in countries where they're not the majority. And we've heard about the courage to do what's right. And I'd like to open up the conversation to our briefing participants, who are going to maybe grill each other, maybe have a polite conversation. But Rebecca, you have a question to start. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for Samara, and hopefully her son. Can I put you on the spot? Because one of the things that I think came up a lot in the discussion, Myra started with it, and I think everybody echoed it, is that we really need to think about how to reach the boys. And I have two small boys, and you managed to, Samara, raise two wonderful boys who, do you consider yourself a feminist? He considers himself, he has to say yes. If he said no, he would be, yeah. So how do you raise boys who are feminists? That's my question.
So when I moved to United States, my boys were 3 and 6. Now they are 23 and 26. So it's a long journey. But I think my boys actually helped me more than I helped them. And I'm not joking, I swear. From even, they were in middle school, it started actually. They were helping me when I was started working with organization, a small organization working, volunteering there on women empowerment. And I come and my older son, who actually both are graduated from college, so I'm very proud. And the older one, who is a writer, who used to help me, I used to speak in front of him because I used to go and speak on women empowerment. So my older son already was talking about, he also very interested in politics. Younger one actually joined my campaign for girls' education. He's actually helped, he's like in Pakistan, he's the one who wanted to do the change the mindset of men. Actually, he was taking me while I was talking about girl rising. So it was hard, but I think I got a lot of moral support in United States. From friends, from their teachers, from my neighbors, so and from my colleagues. So it was, I think, as I compare in United States as a single mother, it was easier because there was no stigma. In Pakistan, that was the thing which was, my heart is still there. And that's what I wanted to do for women there who are single mother, who are divorced in South Asia. And the only thing is, stigma is the thing which make them, like their family pushed them to get married. I decided to not get married. I wanted to do everything on my own. And that's what I wanted to help women, that they have to believe in themselves. Yes, I went in medical school, I studied, but when I do mentoring and coaching in George Washington University at Johns Hopkins Hospital, there are a lot of girls international who come study here and say, when we go back, what we are going to do, Dr. Haq, and I tell them, believe in yourself. If I can do it, you can do it. So I think it is all willpower, and then community surround, helping. So when we talk about the Girls Champion Network, that's the thing intrigued me, that we are going to work as we have to bring all parties, not public, private sector, community leaders, politicians, who help women to empower and help them to grow.
Thank you very much. Would any of you like to add anything to that? Because I have a question for you, Urvashi, so perhaps you can answer it, and then I can ask you my question.
I would love to. Can we hear Samara?
Yeah, of course.
Would you like to come up here so everyone can see you?
Yeah, Surya. My baby.
You're a shy baby.
My baby.
So, I mean, she kind of summed up everything, but I don't think my mom gives herself enough credit as a single mother, because she raised 2 boys. My brother isn't here right now, but I think he would say the same thing. She did a really good job, and growing up, without a father, I think my mom had 2 roles. She raised me as a mom and a dad, and that's extremely tough, coming from the background we're coming from, and going to a country where she didn't speak as well at the time. She didn't assimilate as well. I think she did a great job working as hard as she could to raise us and working towards her career. So I think, to answer your question, it was, why am I a feminist?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a feminist for my mom and for all the other, for all the other women who don't have equal opportunities. But just to add on that, I think being a feminist as a man is also very important, because it's not just women that are benefiting, because you have, eventually you'll have girlfriends, wives, and you'll have daughters one day as a man. And you don't want to have a daughter that's raised in a civilization where she doesn't have equal rights or equal opportunities as another male figure in her classroom. So I think that's why I'm a feminist, and just to support my mom and all the other women.
Thank you.
Thank you. So could I ask you my question?
Sure.
So we've heard a lot about policy, and obviously that's very important. You took matters into your own hands. You set up Study Hall Foundation. And my question to you and to the others is, where is this best started, this continuous journey in girls' education? Is it from the bottom up to then be scaled, or should it come from policymakers? And also, what's the role perhaps of high-profile individuals in the journey in girls' education?
I think it should be multi-pronged. In India it's interesting, and that might be the case in the other South Asian countries too, that our policies, by the way, are very progressive. We got the right to vote without fighting for it, right? Our constitution very clearly states equality for women. Empowerment and feminism is a word that is not taboo. It is there in our policy documents, right? So the policy says all the right things, and yet we have the highest rates of child marriage, of domestic violence, of sexual violence. So clearly it's not translating, and we also have many millions of girls out of school. And so I think it needs to be, definitely policies need to be, and what we do is we use the Constitution as one of the arguments when we work with the teachers and we work with parents, that it's not my opinion, it's not hers, it's not theirs, it's the Constitution. The Constitution gives us this right, it gives you the right, and you should be realizing it and asserting it. So I think this has to be a multi-pronged approach to this. One, the policies, of course, we have them, we should strengthen them further. For example, I'm recommending that we should have gender studies as part of the curriculum, because it's really important, and this inequality in gender, the disparity and the discrimination is lethal. We have women dying every day. Right. So it definitely needs to be addressed. So it should be there for boys and girls both. That's the policy change that should happen, which then translates into curriculum change, which then translates into teacher training change, and then working with communities very closely. There's a whole, every time you talk about gender, you talk about, the rape that happened. And India, unfortunately, now it's being seen as the rape capital of the world, and not inappropriately either. I'm ashamed to say that, but yes. So, they say, we should change mindsets. And how are you changing mindsets? Education is where it should happen. So definitely it should happen in schools with teachers. It should happen with policymakers. And we are trying to present a policy brief. In Rajasthan, I work with the chief minister, and I'm trying to push it there, and we're trying to push it in our state, also at the national level, that gender, not just as gender parity in schools, not just as equal achievement, equal retention, because then my question really is, as you were speaking, Mr. Gomez, that while you said 51% had, the achievement scores of the women, look at the power structure in your country still. How many senators do you have that are women? You couldn't have a Hillary Clinton. Nobody could stomach that, right? And even then, just look at the power structure. How many CEOs? Where in the upper management do you have these women? And if they're doing so well, then why aren't they there? So clearly there's more to it than meets the eye. That there is a very strong patriarchal structure that is, as Rebecca once told me, almost in our DNA. And so how do you change that? And that takes very direct action, and it takes an open discourse on power. And we should not be talking about education in a neutral way and restricting it only to educational achievements and to, what is going on in the classroom in terms of are they learning their math or not, are they completing it or not, what is happening. But really, what are they learning, what are the messages? And are we addressing the power structure, are we addressing the social structure? Otherwise, you'll continue to have the majority minorities. Are we addressing caste, race, poverty? These are important issues, and we don't touch them because somehow we feel that we're too afraid of changing. And a lot of the conversations around education in conferences will refuse to touch these issues. But it's at the crux of it. Why do you want education? Because you want a better world. And you think education is a transformative force. Well, then we should transform education if we want it to become a transformative force.
Would you like to say something about the role of high-profile individuals in this journey?
Well, yes. First, can I just agree? This is so true. I mean, the approach has to be holistic. It has to be. I wish you all could understand, but I'm sure you would. There's something in Urdu which is called Talim Tarbiyat, which means literacy and the way it is taught. Literacy, to be literate is not enough. It's just not enough. I mean, I can read and write, but what good is it, or what use is it if my boy is reluctant to say that I'm a feminist? He should be like this boy and say, I am a feminist. Why am I even being asked that? All it means is equal rights for women. What you have, I should have, and I should be okay with that. So, and this is something we all suffer. I think education on a whole is suffering, and this is not just a problem we have in a third world country. It's all over the world, I think, holistic learning. As far as people like us, I get shy saying celebrities, but I guess, people with public profiles. The first time I realized our importance was, I've been working with a hospital back in Pakistan, Shaukat Khanum Memorial Hospital. It is one of the largest cancer hospitals. And for the last 5 years, the first year that I went in, I was a little like, how can I tell these kids? And we go into different government colleges, government schools all around Pakistan to make girls aware of breast cancer. I was like, how can I change this? What I realized was that when a doctor came on board and spoke about it, they were just like, when I came on board, they were listening. So I realized that my voice has some sort of an effect. that means I can actually use it well. So I would actually go up there. First, I would talk to them, joke about them, talk to them about their dreams and aspirations and the shows that I have done. I would dance with them, sing with them. I had their attention, and then I would go full on, trying to make them aware of breast cancer. And it's such a, you would be amazed. One of the other things that are very important is awareness, you know? That is so, so, so important. Something like breast cancer, we are shy to say breast in my country. And that's the number one reason why most women won't go for a checkup. They are so scared. They don't want to say that we have a lump. They're not aware of their own bodies. They're not aware of themselves. So yes, awareness, I'd say, is another big thing. I wish I grew up with a curriculum which was what they're all talking about, really. I hope we can do that.
Thank you. Do I have questions from the panel, or shall I open it to the audience? Right, lucky you. Who would like to start off the questions from the audience? Yeah, we've got a gentleman just there in a blue shirt. There's a microphone coming.
You guys all done great, to be honest with you. My name is Saed. I go by Sami. I'm from Jordan and proud to be an American. My question is to Rebecca. You just mentioned that a friend of you were saying that they prepare girls for marriage. Yeah. To be honest with you, the recent research, 60% girls go to universities and 40% boys. So they are higher. And last year we were shocked, we were happy actually, that the increase of girls taking care of themselves, educating themselves, and going to colleges and universities. So I just want to, just comment on that. Go ahead. My wife, Sahar Fayyad, she's one of the top 50 this year. Yay. From Jordan. She wants to comment, but I'm going to translate. She's going to say
فقط للتوضيح، هناك معلومة استهجنتها في كلام ريبيكا حول أن هناك برامج تنظمها وزارة التربية والتعليم والعديد من الوزارات عن تعليم إعداد الفتيان لسوق العمل. هذه البرامج معدة للفتيان والفتيات. بالعكس الإقبال على الزواج، أو عندنا إحنا نسبة الزواج تأخر سن الزواج في الأردن، بالإضافة إلى أنه لا يوجد هناك نهائياً برامج من أجل أنه الفتيات يكون همهم الزواج. بالعكس في نسبة تعلم كتير عالية. أنا هلأ طلاب يتخرجوا من الجامعات وفي سوق العمل، ولكن هناك برامج تثقيفية بعد أن ارتفعت حالات الطلاق في الأردن، كيف يتعاملوا مع بيت الزوجية، كيف اتخاذ القرار، حل المشكلات بحيث يكون بيت آمن. إذا لا يوجد في وزارات التربية والتعليم أو وزارة العمل برامج لإعداد الفتاة للزواج من أجل الزواج، لا. التعليم هو بالنسبة لهم هو السلاح اللي ممكن فيه الفتاة أنها تجابه تحديات الحياة.
Okay, she's saying that there is a programs right now in Jordan to educate girls because recently the divorce, the percentage rate of divorce is going higher. And now there is programs for that to educate girls to start having a peace of mind. And now they, to be honest, they're getting this kind of point. The thing is, there is a programs right now for boys to head to like a kind of schools which is not to go to university because they get their marks in high school kind of, average. So they encourage them to go to the other kind of school, which is, technical schools, yeah. The thing is, right now, we hope that politicians in Jordan focus on education, by their means, the bottom of their hearts. Not, to be honest with you, there is the media, it says it covers like we are doing good. We are not. My wife now, she's a teacher, now she's a principal, by the way. 2 months ago, she got promoted as a principal of, and we've seen a lot. What's in the news, different than what's going on. We need to work a lot. Teachers need to be more, to love their jobs. Unfortunately, you can't say, hush. You're not allowed to say anything. Whatever goes on. They waste their time sometimes. I'm not saying all of them. I respect all teachers. So my question is, for the too many organizations that needs to be, before funding, that they have to get close and know what's going on, where's the money goes. On the other part, refugees, unfortunately, the Syrian refugees, the one you talked about, it's right now, they let them get married at 15 or maybe sometimes younger, but in their, like camps. And they do it not with the governmental, contract, the kind of thing, these governmental, no. So we need to focus. We know that they are suffering, and we have to help them. But, we can't do anything. It's a poor country. But in general, any funds got to be, know where it goes, especially for these right people, like camps, refugee camps, and try to educate them.
Thank you
and
very
thank
much
you
for
a
your
lot.
question. Rebecca, would you like to respond?
Sure. Well, you have a lot of important things you pointed out, but I have just 2 quick responses, maybe to give some more time to others. First is congratulations for being top 50 teacher. To your wife, that's a huge recognition, and thank you for all the work you're doing. And second, I think you pointed out something very important around the research and sort of the gender dynamics within Jordan, and thank you for doing that. The research I was talking about was done by a visiting scholar who came to my institute at my center at Brookings, named Mahera Khan, and she did a lot of research, and she wasn't looking necessarily at the college level, women who were at university level. There certainly are lots of women who are highly educated and heavily participating. She was looking at the broader population, women and men really, who were in sort of technical training and finishing high school, etc. And what she found within that population was that girls were actually doing a bit better than boys in school, but they weren't transferring to the labor market as well, in equal numbers, even though they were doing better in school and in skills training. And even programs that had incentives to bring women to the workforce were failing. And so she asked herself, and she was running one of those programs, well, what is it? And she looked within the curriculum in Jordan and said, well, maybe there's some sort of messages in the schooling. It gets back exactly to what Urvashi was talking about, to what Mira picked up on. And she compared the gender messages that boys and men were getting in the Jordanian curriculum, and found that all the messages around boys were about professionalization and jobs and external to the home, and all the messages inside the textbooks that girls were getting were about being mothers and wives and good sisters and cooking and domestic chores. Very important things, not to say it's bad or if you choose to do it, but they weren't developing this aspiration. And so that's the research I'm talking about.
Thank you. We've got time for one short question from somebody else. Thank you very much. Yes, please. There's a microphone coming.
I am an American. I am a teacher here in the UAE in Fujairah, which is an emirate on the other side of the coast, and I teach in a girls' school in a village. As an American, I have watched our election from here. I have watched Brexit from here. And I have seen that as we have conversations about power and patriarchy, there is a backlash, and it challenges the movement forward that we make. What can we learn from this when we're talking about feminism and equality and the boys who are primary and middle school students now? What are we doing on the ground? What are we doing in policy so that we don't have this situation 10 years from now where the power that we've challenged backlashes, whiplashes in our faces, and we wonder, did we make any progress at all?
Thank you. Is there a speaker who'd like to answer that?
Well, I think Samara's done it with her 2 boys. We need every mother needs to raise their boys as feminists.
Please.
You know, I don't think you're getting a backlash because people have been talking about power. It's because they haven't been talking about it. They've just been exercising the power, right? There's a difference between that. And secondly, look at any freedom struggle anywhere. Look at the apartheid in South Africa. Look at the the anti-colonial movement in all the British colonies, including India, Pakistan, everywhere. And look at slavery in the US, the civil rights movement. There's always a backlash whenever you stand up to the power. People with power don't like giving it up. It's as simple as that. There's always a backlash. And what is your choice? Exactly. So you keep moving forward, and you move forward strategically, you move forward strongly, you move forward intellectually, and you move forward from the ground, from the top, in a multi-pronged way, till you're able to change the power structure and change the power dynamism. And I just want to quickly respond to the other thing, you know, and I think it was tied up a little bit to what you said too, that in India too, whenever you have results, the girls do better than the boys. I did better than my brothers, by the way. Okay? Doesn't change the power structure. That's why patriarchy needs to be addressed. Or you will continue to have girls going with better results and continuing to populate the marriage market. And what is the marriage market? Girls are raised to be valued. They are valued for domestic labor, reproductive labor, and sexual labor. That's what their USP. And education doesn't figure. But they're intellectual persons. They're moral beings. And so when you start looking at them like that, so you have to challenge a view that will take that narrow view of them. That is when perceptions will change, and the high results will translate into a different place in the power, will translate into a different power structure, a more equitable one.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick observation. We inherit a legacy of oppression. So how do we break that legacy? In the United States, for example, maybe 20% of Latinos voted for Trump. So there's thoughts about how many times the oppressed become the oppressor themselves. So I think we have to have an awareness of how we inherit. There's a legacy of oppression. So how do we deal with that?
Thank you very much. So we're coming to the end of our time here. I'd like to thank all of you very much for coming, and to thank our speakers for sharing their stories. Thank you.